Are you good?
Yep.
Should I restate it?
No, you're good.
Okay, I'm going to bring the meeting to order. I've been informed by the mayor that he'll be tied up for the beginning of the meeting in a business event in Canby related to his business, so I will preside initially, and he will join us afterward and take over the proceedings. For the moment, if we could call the roll.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith. Here. Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
And Commission President Frank O'Donnell.
Here. And I would ask everybody, as is our custom, to check your phones and silence them or turn them off. At this time, if you would join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So it is my pleasure and distinct honor to do item 19-195. That is the administering of the oath of office for Commission Position Number 2. The Honorable Lorraine McNeese, our judge, will preside, and joined with Denise McGriff, our candidate. If you would please step to the front and take the oath of office, please.
Are we standing in the appropriate?
Yes.
Just stand so that the camera can see whoever that is. I don't know where it is. If you would raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Denise McGriff,
I, Denise McGriff,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United
and
States
of the State of Oregon,
and of the State of Oregon,
along with the Oregon City Municipal Charter and Code,
along with the Oregon City Municipal Charter and Code,
and will, to the best of my ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
faithfully perform the duties
faithfully perform the duties
of City Commissioner of Oregon City
of City Commissioner of Oregon City
during my incumbency thereof.
during my incumbency thereof.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Is this on? Anyway, I want to thank my many friends and family and all the citizens of Oregon City. I will do the best job I possibly can for all of you. And please, as you always continue to do, contact me whenever, even in Fred Meyer. I'll look forward to seeing you there in aisle 5. Is that right, Bob?
That's right.
So nothing will change. Just let me know if you have any concerns or issues, and I will do my very best to talk to our city staff and see what we can do to resolve them. But thank you for your trust. I appreciate it. You want us to move this?
Nope, you're fine.
This was yours.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Commissioner McGriff, if you would
You're
like to
supposed to
take...
stay.
There you go.
Thank you.
So Commissioner McGriff, if you would like to take other photos with friends or family, please do so.
Are the friends and family, you've got enough photographs? Anyway, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Won't do it every night. You know.
Okay, he said he's not gonna do it every night, but he'll do it tonight. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Next up, you'll get about 10 binders of
I can't
stuff.
wait. I'll just replace all the planning commission stuff with the
Yeah.
city commission
Yeah.
stuff, which I have 10 binders.
Yeah.
Anyway, you guys, I have cards now, so I'll be passing them out. You see me? Thank you for the balloon. This adds a little festive Festivity. How come we don't have balloons at planning commission?
I didn't get one, I never got one either.
You
so.
never got a balloon? Okay.
You could probably make that happen now. If you wanted.
So our next item of business is item 3B, 19-189, mayoral appointments to the city boards and commissions. I will do that on behalf of the mayor at this point. Those two appointments are the appointment of Alicia Hammock, city resident, Caulfield Neighborhood Association, to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee for a 3-year term of March 20th, 2019 to December 31st, 2021. The second appointment is the appointment of Denise Beasley as a McLaughlin Neighborhood Representative to the Citizen Involvement Committee for the remainder of the 2-year term ending December 31st, 2019. So made. Our next item of business is citizen comments, where citizens are allowed up to 3 minutes to comment on items probably unrelated to that, which is on the agenda tonight. Do we have any citizen comments? We have 4. If you would care.
Robin Schmidt and Damon Maybe.
Your name, please,
My name is Robin Schmidt.
and Oregon City resident,
I reside in Milwaukee.
Milwaukee, okay?
I'm the executive director of the Father's Heart Street Ministry, and I've come to give you a little report on some of the great things that were happening during our night shelter. We served through November, and from November through March, 2,496 bed nights out of a total of the county bed nights, which was 7,161. In our county, we've seen 63% increase in bed nights since just last year. By providing a safe and peaceful place for those living outside during these freezing temperatures, we were also keeping numbers down in the emergency hospital visits, and at the same time, we were receiving people from the hospital that were released with no place to go. We also cared for veterans. One of our veterans that we served had some major heart issues. He was with us for a while, then he was in the hospital. And then when he came back to us, he didn't even know who he was. He found his way back to the Father's Heart and was having some significant memory problems, but we remembered who he was. And I'm happy to say just recently we were able to help him reunite with his family to help him. Another population that was served at the night shelter were women fleeing domestic violence. And we learned that most of the women we serve in town will experience repeated abuse when they do not have a choice of a safe place, of safe overnight shelter. They're vulnerable and making poor choices, unfortunately, to stay with abusers rather than staying out in the cold. So thank you for allowing us to serve the women in our community. They are very appreciative of having a place to stay. And just this last week, we've seen a veteran housed and 2 people begin full-time work. And these are some of the benefits of being able to sleep safely. But the biggest benefit is being able to provide dignity to the people in need in our community. This year marks the 10th year that the Father's Heart has been serving in this capacity of an emergency warming shelter. And we want to thank you for allowing us to serve the vulnerable citizens of Oregon City and Clackamas County. And with your permission, we have always been allowed to keep women safe from abusers, give back to our veterans that have served us, listen and guide our seniors that are terrified from living on the streets, and many others in need. We are concerned with a current proposed code requiring a conditional use for warming shelters and the financial burden for us. We hope that after 10 years of successful and faithful service through providing an emergency warming shelter, you'll preclude these requirements so that we may continue to serve in this capacity. We do hope before that you vote to on the proposed code that you could come and visit the Father's Heart to help see what we do there. We invite you to come and see the services that we provide and the wonderful people that we're serving. Thank you.
Thank you for your summary and your work.
Thank you.
Mr. Maybe, if you give your name and
Yep.
city of residence.
Damon Maybe, a resident of Oregon City. and I'm sorry the mayor isn't here to hear what I have to say, and I'm sorry that Denise has to hear what I have to say. Good evening, commissioners. I attended the work session on the 12th and listened to your discussion on the Buena Vista Clubhouse, and I have to say I'm ashamed of you. I have sat on the commission and I know about making hard decisions. This is not a hard decision. Taking care of the clubhouse is no different than mowing a park. It is a duty of the city. Holding up the citizens for the cost of repowering and securing the building is a travesty. What's next? Coin ops on the water parks and Rivercrest and the library? The inability of the city to find $5,000 to hook up the house and the $500 a year to keep on the power is unbelievable. The city has a budget of $67 million and it can't spare 0.0009% to keep a historic building in heat and lights, particularly when your own budget shows that you had $100,000 in unanticipated revenue. Here's a question for you. It also costs to have the power removed from the building. Assuming the same expense, the city could have used that disconnect money to just keep paying the power bill for the last 6 years, and they'd be ahead in the cost. The mayor asked about a possible increased insurance cost by powering the clubhouse. But what about the increased cost if someone breaks in again and gets hurt? Parks Department claims to be millions of dollars behind in maintenance, so why not start here? You have citizens who care, and if the charts shown at the work session are accurate, it generates 3 to 5 times the revenue it costs to maintain the building. I don't know whose dumb decision it was to close the building, but the smart decision should be yours. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Shannon Means and William Gifford.
Hello, my name is Shannon Means, and I am a resident of Oregon City, and I'm one of the people that the Father's Heart has saved. Just circumstances beyond my control. I lost my housing situation and did not know where to go. They were there and let me in with open arms, no questions, give me a place to sleep and something hot to eat.
Excuse me, Mom, could you pull the mic closer to you? The people in the back of the room are signaling they can't hear your words. Thank you.
I still work out of that as a residential place where I can get something to eat, can take a shower. I do not have a drug or alcohol addiction. I'm not fleeing domestic violence. I do not have any mental challenges. Therefore, I qualify for nothing. So fortunately, I did just get employment, and hopefully after a shorter stay, then I'll be able to get a place on my own. But they're helping us, and we need them. I mean, I might not be here if they hadn't been there for me to help me, because it was cold for a while. They're doing really, really good work. So I hope you can keep them in mind before you take that vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gifford.
Mr. President and Commissioners, congratulations, Commissioner McGriff. My name is William Gifford. I live in Oregon City, and I wanted to wish you all a happy equinox. Spring has begun as of 2:58 this afternoon. A few things. I was pleased to see so many of you at the Metro Parks and Nature Bond meeting at the VFW last night. I thought it was a very good turnout. There's a lot of exciting things happening in our community. This morning, 7:30, I was I'm on the Bond Oversight Committee for the Clackamas Community College Bond, and got a tour of the new Desjardins Pauling Science Center. Very exciting things happening there. And then this afternoon, I was also pleased to see some of you over at the Metro presentation on the Molalla Avenue project. So a lot of great things are going on. I'll call attention to an email I sent all of you this afternoon. I did not send it to Commissioner McGriff yet, but I could be happy to, pointing out that this week the median price for a house in Oregon City, the median price is $560,000. Are we moving in soon? Yeah. And building on that, next week, on Tuesday, the OCBA is going to be having their forum focused on homelessness. And the Clackamas Homeless Coalition, which has been formed and is proved to be a very successful program. It started out just in Oregon City, it's moved to Clackamas, and there are a lot of people who think that it ought to be metro-wide, the good work that they're doing. So I would encourage you all, if you have a chance, at 11:30, come next Tuesday to the OCBA forum, great lunch as well. And also Friday at 10 o'clock, Wes, I serve on the Wes Advisory Committee as well. Wes is having a ribbon cutting at their Carly Creek Water Quality Project. If you don't know where Carly Creek is, the county has an industrial park out on 120th and Cap Road. If you type in Carly Creek, that's C-A-R-L-I, Carly Creek into Google, you'll find out more about that project. It starts at 10 o'clock. Yeah, so working stiffs will have a little difficulty, but but if you have an opportunity to come out there and see what really great work Wes is doing, there's just a whole lot of good things that are happening in this community, and it's a pleasure to be part of it.
Can you give the public the acronym?
Acronym for WES, yes, thank you very much. WES, strange acronym, stands for Water and Environmental Service. Water and Environment Service. And they're the ones that take care of the sewer water.
Thank you, Mr. Gifford.
Thank you. Amy Wilhite.
Oh, I don't need a warming up. I'm warm enough.
Ms. Wilhite.
Commissioners, my name is Amy Wilhite, citizen of Oregon City, and I come to you infuriated directly from the Malala Avenue open house. Our Gaffney Lane neighborhood has tried to be involved as much as possible. We know we're still in some of the early stages, but the proposal that they have outlined has ignored every request that we made from our Gaffney Lane neighborhood, and it is appalling. And I'm just very livid, and I want you guys to know that, and you will be hearing more from me. I feel that we're told, and you hear me say the same thing, I'm all about citizen involvement. We have been involved from the get-go. Poor Dana down there got an earful from me because it's a mess. I'm sorry, but the plans are just absolutely nothing that has been talked about or we have asked for or has been promised in this whole supposedly making Malala Avenue be a wonderful place for bikes and pedestrians and cars, and it's making it a nightmare. And I just needed you to know.
We customarily don't engage in conversation, but I'd like to. Can you tell me to whom you directed those requests that you just referenced?
We have had Dana come to our meetings. Dana Webb, she's the project manager. And so we have had her come to our Gaffney Lane, and that's who we have talked to. And she's been involved with us all along the way.
And you and your group got no answer whatsoever?
I'm saying that all of their proposed, the drawings right now, none of them address any of the concerns we brought up. And for now there's some new guy there. I don't know who it was. He was on the project design team, I guess. And he says, oh no, I'm the person you'll need to talk to. Well, we've been engaged this whole time. Mm-hmm. They should have been aware of the concerns, and every concern, I brought them up again tonight, and they said, oh, well, this study doesn't warrant that, this study doesn't warrant that. But the thing, they're talking about putting in these push-button pedestrian crossings, not at intersections in the middle of nowhere where people don't cross. So now they're adding lights, so you're gonna have more stoppage, it's just very, very disruptive, the whole thing, so.
Let me ask, Mr. City Manager, is there anything we do to rectify that input we just heard, or was it given due consideration?
John, you want to talk a little bit about some of the warrants?
Yeah, I just guess I want to remind everybody that we're trying to not show too many things, right? It's a 30% concept plan.
That's
we're
not
trying
what
to
we
get
were told
public
tonight.
input. That's the idea with the open house is not, leave room for community input. I'm sure the concerns that I've heard from the neighborhood have been about the ability to cross at Gaffney and Claremont in particular. We're trying to deal with those. We wanted a safer corridor, but to deal with this, I think I need to have a conversation with Amy and just find out really what
I would agree.
specifically we're talking
We can
about.
set
Yeah,
that up and.
Absolutely. I
start
just
that
wanted you guys to
communication.
know what's happening out there.
I appreciate you coming forward and letting us know. Thanks, Amy. Moving forward, our next
Mr.
step.
O'Donnell, I have a question for
Yes,
you.
yes, Commissioner.
How are we going to find out what the concerns of the neighborhood are?
How would we do that, Mr. Lewis? They're going to be related to you. They can certainly be emailed direct to the commission by Amy Wilhite or whomever.
All the public,
And we would like maybe to close the loop after you've discussed with her, we can have a report of some kind. Understanding that, as you said, it's a 30% concept. You know, are these things being taken into consideration? That's all I think that, in fairness, we would ask.
yeah, we can create a running list. We were taking public comment tonight by questionnaires and looking for, community feedback. So, and we can get, I'm assuming Amy's got a long list, so we can go through
Sounds
that
like it.
long list.
Okay, let's do that. Any other questions from the commission?
Just a comment, I mean, to make Amy's point, though, I mean, the neighborhood association was specifically, I mean, we tap our neighborhood associations to get input, and early on in the process, I mean, they've championed this project, so I don't want it to appear like we're favoring one comment over the other comment or anything like that, or her set of comments, but I think it's really important, though, that when the neighborhood associations get together and they put as much time and effort into it as this neighborhood has, that we ensure that the neighborhood association, that their comments are included in the project design, or, certainly going forward, making sure that the neighborhood association is involved. And Amy being the chair of that neighborhood association should be able to be update as much as possible.
I completely agree. I mean, we're interested in community feedback for sure. So that's why we're here, we're open, we've been talking about it, we've advertised it. And, I'm not fully understanding why there's such a disconnect, but we'll get to the bottom of it.
I will say, I do like the format that Ms. Turway's group has been using to provide the list of the comments of, when we're looking at the equitable housing items like we are tonight, she's providing a summary of comments, and you'll see we have advisory teams, planning commission, a summary of public comment, a summary of staff comments. And so I think the way this is presented to us is really good. And in that case, the neighborhood association in this case should have its own line item, since they were a key component to, they are the neighborhood for this particular project. So just a recommendation that this works really well for me. I like it. Good job, Ms. Turway. And maybe this would be something that's helpful when you're collecting public comment for this project.
Yeah, we'll get that model.
And I do think, what we want to do is drill down to the root cause. If that happened to this neighborhood organization, it could be happening to others. So if there's some failure in our methodology of communication, let's look at how that works and correct that. The message I want to send to the general public is this commission you're looking at, seated here tonight, is one that's going to listen to you. We're here to hear what you have to say. There may be even some rule changes that allow additional public input, because we are here to represent you. So, as I used to watch Commissioner McGriff run planning commission meetings, she was welcoming, and I think you'll find the same is about to happen with this commission. So please, but when you do come forward, have your presentation together. Don't wander, don't meander, know what you want to say and say it. And we don't need 15 people with the same message. We need one or two or three that make the point. So please feel free to approach this commission, because that's what we're here to do.
Mr. President.
Sir, sir, if you want to come to the mic and speak.
Yeah, I was going to ask if it was okay to come to the mic.
Well, I'm sure they'll have you fill out a form. You can do it after the fact.
Okay, thank you very much. We are Bob Mahoney, Oregon City. I've served on the planning commission almost 8 years, been involved in public service almost 20, served in the military for 3. And it's guaranteed, absolutely guaranteed, that something always gets lost in translation.
Undoubtedly.
Sooner or later, somebody's got to make a decision.
That's what
There's
we're
a
here to
four-letter word that you just do not ignore or ask a question about, especially in the military, and it was duck. Everybody ducked because they knew if they didn't, they'd pay the price. So sooner or later, you're going to have to take all the information available to you, regardless of its origin, and make a decision based on the information. And, we all know this. Damon got up here and he made a good point. Sooner or later, you're going to have to make a decision based on the information that you have. And you've all made that declaration as elected officials to do that. And it's your responsibility to wade through this information and what's best for the city of Oregon City, just not for somebody that's got a point to make, which is maybe a good point. But sooner or later, you're going to have to step up to the plate, as you're elected to do, and make that decision, knowing full well that the information in front of you is not 100% complete and accurate, but you do the best you can with what you got. Okay, that's fine.
And sir,
by the
no
way-
one here shirks that duty. And I remember when I was running for office, a great man, Eddie Alec, told me, you're the guy that says yes or no.
Yeah.
So be prepared to
Right,
make that
right,
decision, and
right.
everybody here is prepared to do that.
And it could be the right decision.
We don't care if it's popular, we just want it to be right.
Yeah.
Okay,
But in somebody's mind, it could be the wrong decision, so.
maybe. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Bob.
Next item is the adoption of the agenda. Hearing no one does not want to adopt it, we'll move forward to item 6, public hearings. And this being development code amendments, I would look to Ms. Turway and her staff, so.
Thank you very much. We're here tonight to talk about general code amendments. A lot of them do include strategies to remove or reduce barriers and sometimes add incentives to housing. At the end of this, we're just looking at what can we allow in our code. We're not building affordable housing. We're just taking one tool in our toolbox and seeing how we want to refine it for us. As you recall, we have a big package. I think Commissioner Smith had, his couple inches worth of code. And so we've broken that into 4 bites. And this is the 4th meeting, looking at the last segment. The general process is public comment is open and testimony is open for anything, but we just decided to break it up by topic. Anything in the code amendments is going to be assumed to be okay by the commission unless it's pulled aside. When it's pulled aside, we'll talk about that at the next meeting, which is April 3rd, to get your final direction on those list of issues. Pete's got for you that running list of issues, so if there's something that you disagree with in the code amendments or want to talk about more, please remember to pull it aside. And then the plan after that is to come back with the final red lines as well. So with that, we have Pete Walter, our planner, to walk through the package for you.
If I may comment before we go on, there's so much information in here. I hesitate to say that if we don't isolate it and signify we want to review that, that is forever not able to be reviewed. I'd like to leave that door open if that's okay with the balance of the commission. Let the record show that
Fine
the
by
mayor
me.
has just joined us at 7:30 and will momentarily take over the meeting.
Our goal is to narrow the issues and then let the public know what the outstanding issues are or that they're still under discussion. So if you do have something, we just want to encourage you to add it to the list so that we can let the public know who's interested in that item to come and talk about it.
Certainly, thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Walter.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell, and welcome, Commissioner McGriff. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete.
As you know, we've been through a lot of meetings and opportunities for input. We are closing in on the end of the process, but there is still plenty of opportunity for public comment. And I'll provide my contact information at the end of the meeting. Tonight, we're reviewing a variety of procedural improvements to the application review processes. We'll also be discussing the issue of lot size reduction, preliminary plat preparation, and restrictions on covenants, controls, and restrictions with respect to missing middle housing types, particularly accessory dwelling units and internal conversions. And as Laura mentioned, on April 3rd, staff is going to prepare a final summary for you of outstanding items for final direction and a framework through which we hope those items can be efficiently addressed by the commission. And as you know, you have a large packet of changes. Our expectation is that following April 3rd, we will be making changes based on your direction to that packet and bringing you back another packet for review. These amendments are likely to change throughout the review process to respond to comments from the public and from the City Commission and Planning Commission. And with that, I'll go into the specifics. The first item that we are discussing with respect to procedure is the Historic Review Board. This is a fairly small set of changes. The chapter governing the Historic Review Board had some redundant language regarding appeals, and this simply removes that language and refers to the existing appeals process and fee schedule for all land use decisions.
Hey, Pete,
Yes.
before you go any further, I was wondering about the appeals section being removed, mainly just because I don't see replacement text
Okay.
that defers the process to 1750.
Okay.
And so,
So if there is no cross-reference there, then, you know, if we can provide one. We do have the historic review process is a quasi-judicial process, and there is a discussion of it in Chapter 1750 and referring to the Historic Review Board as a body, a decision-making body. So it is embodied in the standard procedures section of the code.
so the chapter that we're proposing to amend is in Title 2. So it's where it talks about what each of the boards and commissions are like. And so in this case, they were talking about process associated with that board and fees associated with that board, when there's a separate chapter, 1740, which is our Historic Review Board, and it's in 1740 that we make that cross connection to 1750. That sounds wordy, but where we talk about what the standards are for Historic Review Board and the process, we didn't want to have some conflicting language in the wrong spots. So we want to keep process with standards in 1740 and out of this specific chapter.
Reimbursement districts, they're used to finance large public infrastructure projects. The Public Works staff has suggested some revisions to clarify the definitions for what is a street improvement in that section, and removes some outdated references to specific zone districts and street widths, because those are already discussed in a separate chapter of Public Improvement Code. So this is essentially just a cleanup language. Property line adjustments and abandonments. This process is a type 1 decision that allows property to exchange between two parcels. It does not create new lots, but lots must continue to comply with applicable zoning standards following an adjustment or abandonment. The proposed revisions provide more clarity about what those standards are, such as following the adjustment, you must meet minimum lot width, minimum lot size, minimum lot depth, and those sorts of things. Previously, those things weren't specified. It just said you must comply with applicable standards, and it wasn't very clear what it was. So that's what this is for. Land divisions include minor partitions of up to 3 lots and subdivisions of 4 or more lots. The proposed revisions consolidate standards that were redundant into a single chapter. Tracts are portions of a land division that are not intended for residential use, such as for stormwater treatment or open space. And the revisions clarify that those areas don't need to comply with certain design standards that would apply to residential lots, like minimum lot width and lot size, because those are different uses. Flag lots, which are sometimes used for infill situations, have a narrow pole, it's called a pole, section of the lot that is used to provide space for access and utilities connecting to the public street. And there's a small revision to increase the width, the minimum width of that flagpole from 8 feet to 10 feet. There's a clarification to the current final plat review process that we would propose to allow a reduction or increase of one lot from the preliminary plat if it is in compliance with the zoning. These submittal requirements, therefore, have been more clearly spelled out to reflect our current policy. This was some ambiguous language in the code previously, and this tightens up that language. We'll be discussing language regarding prohibiting private restrictions on accessory dwelling units and internal conversions further in this presentation.
Well, there'll be a number of items in there that I think will merit further discussion. I see two for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, you're gonna circle back to the preliminary plat?
Yeah,
Okay.
that one, yeah. Lot averaging, we're going to be talking about as well. So the proposed code for lot averaging restrictions contains all of the previous provisions from 2018, which include that lot sizes are allowed to be only 10% smaller than the minimum lot size, rather than 20%. It would cap the total number of lots that can be smaller than the zone to 25%. And as you know, it includes a provision to remove power line area, easement area from the calculation of net developable area. And the Planning Commission also added the provision that this is applicable only to lots intended for single-family detached use.
So how does this differ from what the City Commission passed in 2018?
Prior to 2018, well, with the exception of this one addition intention for single-family detached use, it's largely the same. Prior to 2018, the code simply allowed 20% lot averaging throughout subdivisions. Yeah.
Which is what the City Commission did in 2018, except added the power line provision. Okay, thank you.
When you say 20%, you're saying a 20% reduction in the individual lot? And, but there was no cap on the number of lots in a division that could be reduced, is that correct?
A quarter of the lots could qualify for that 20%, 10% reduction under current code.
So today, if you want to do a subdivision, an individual lot can be up to 20% below the minimum lot size for the zoning designation, provided the subdivision as a whole averages, and there's some things that you take out of that, like the power line easement. And so that was the language approved by the City Commission last year. And under these revisions, it changes it to, instead of going 10% or 20% smaller, you can only be 10% smaller. And you also cap how many lots can be smaller. Only a quarter of the lots in the subdivision can be smaller. Whereas now there's no.
Confused me again, because you
So-
just said that prior to this change, that it was 20% with no cap on the number of lots.
That's what it is today.
Okay,
And
so you're capping not only the number of lots, but the size of the reduction of each individual lot, is that correct?
yes, it
Okay.
was added by the Planning Commission. And then we had come into this from the Equitable Housing Group, proposing to limit it to just single-family detached, because when you get different types of housing, we didn't want those to also be reduced as well.
Okay.
Site plan and design review for non-residential properties and for multifamily projects. We discussed the proposed amendments to those standards at a previous hearing. We've added specific language regarding what types of projects or modifications may be eligible for type 1 and type 2 review, such as 3 to 4 plexes, townhomes, certain alterations and additions, food carts, et cetera, with the intent to streamline review of projects that comply with clear and objective standards, and those standards are cross-referenced in the code. The list of what types of modifications may be approved through a type 2 review process has become more specific, previously applied to any site plan and design review standard, and created some ambiguity for applicants as to what threshold should be for when you either go to a planning commission review or what can be approved by staff with discretion. So that list of projects has been tightened up and specific, including certain changes to landscaping, vehicle connections, on-site pedestrian circulation, the undergrounding of utilities, the changes to building location, and certain architectural building details and windows. So it's a limited section of things that can be approved through the type 2 process. And as with previously, any modification would be required to meet the intent or purpose of the written standard. And then we're also clarifying those types of projects that are exempt from certain design standards, including structures smaller than 1,000 square feet, small parking lots less than 5 spaces, and truck stops, meaning transit truck stops that are, over the road, large.
Explain that to me one more time.
So.
Is this a space in the street where a truck can stop and unload?
There's a large site that would be for a transportation facility, the type of thing you would normally see out on the highway driving
mean like
across
Jubits?
country. Pardon?
Like Jubits?
Yes.
It's a truck stop.
That's a truck
Yeah.
stop, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it doesn't make sense for those types of sites to have to comply with a urban design standard for a commercial building because of their circulation requirements for the vehicles and those sorts of things.
Do we anticipate a truck stop anytime soon?
Not yet.
All right, well, better
That's
be
in the
prepared.
code,
No,
so it's in the current code.
Dating ourselves.
Yeah. So the current master plan process would be renamed the master plan planned unit development process. That is intended to support a more creative subdivision option for projects that incorporate a variety of residential uses and possibly mixed uses. For example, if you mix together apartments with cluster homes or single-family development in the same development. The process allows for a voluntary master plan for smaller sites of 2 or more acres. We're removing the requirement for a 5-year minimum timeline for a master plan. And the proposed language makes the master plan process more robust and more attuned to residential development and standards. With respect to variances, we're looking at ways to tighten up the language for minor variances. Minor variances are allowed to be approved through staff as a type 2 review process. And the code would allow certain variances to architectural standards for single-family dwellings, duplexes, single-family attached dwellings, internal conversions, accessory dwelling units, and 3 to 4 plexes. So those have been listed as type 2 modifications, or type 2 variances. Zone changes and amendments chapter. I just want to make clear that we are not changing the zoning map. What we're talking about here is amending the chapter for the process for zone changes. Clarify that text or map amendments to the comprehensive plan or to the zoning code and the zoning map are subject to this chapter. These changes are very minor and just remove some conflicting language. Our administration and procedures section is chapter 1750. There are a variety of simplifications to those standardized procedures for review and notice. These include acknowledging newer information technologies that are more widely available, such as email, electronic copies of applications, and use of the city website for notices. It also includes, as part of the equitable housing project recommendations, an expedited review process for qualifying affordable housing projects. And some of the application requirements have been more clarified based on current procedures that we already use. Issues with respect to title can be determined earlier in the review process rather than some sort of a hiccup further down the road by allowing a trio in place of a title report, requiring a receipt for taxes paid, and requiring a statement of any liens on the property by the city.
Pete, before you go on, could you just explain to the public that the changes that you're making to the administration and procedures section does not in any way negate the mailed notice that people, you explained this at the Planning Commission, and I just think for the purposes of the public, it would just be a good idea.
Yeah, what we're, right now the code, and this isn't gonna change, you're required to provide 300-foot, what we call 300-foot notice, which is a mailed notice to every taxpayer within 300 feet of the tax lot on which the development is proposed. That's a standard procedure for a type 2 through 4 process. Higher level decisions that require planning commission, city commission review, currently are required to be noticed in the public newspaper of general circulation. However, we're not confident that a lot of people are aware of those notices or even read those notices. So what we're doing currently is doing that, but also providing notice on the city website and through our email to the Citizen Involvement Committee and the heads, the chairs and vice chairs of the various neighborhood associations who are duly designated officials of their neighborhood associations. So that would take the place of the newspaper notice. But yeah, the mail notices would continue, and so that's what's being proposed.
I'm going to comment on that, Pete. I remember when Mike Mitchell was running for office, he made a point which I totally agree with. The formal notice is such that to understand the implications, you have to drill down a couple levels. And maybe by supplementing that with our website, we can put in plainer language what the impact of those notices are.
Yeah.
I know there's a legal requirement, right, but it doesn't tell our people what's really going on here.
Yeah,
We've been working on the land use notices that go out for development, and we now, in addition to including the map of where it is, we include like the site plan or something like that, so a picture of what the building will look like or the subdivision will look like, and we have a section that has plain language. There's also the legal stuff with the applicable criteria, which sounds jargony, but it's there if you want it. And then, as Pete was talking about, everything goes on our website, and it has for a long time, so the full application is on there, so you can always see it.
Very good, thank you.
Pete, has there been any discussion about expanding the distance in which we provide notice? I mean, 350 feet is not very far at all. Or 300 feet.
Some discussion about that, yeah. The county requires, I think, a 500-foot notice, for example, but.
Yeah, the state requirements are 100. So we have this discussion.
We talked about it a lot at Planning Commission.
Yeah.
About maybe expanding it to 350 or 400, and we were all sort of all over the place about it.
I mean, I realize we're meeting the minimum bar of 100 feet. I mean, goodness, that's the state's minimum of 100 feet. So that's a really low bar. So I don't know. I think it's something that we should consider as far as how much that reaches. I mean, that's just not very far away. I mean, I could easily see, a development happening, a block away from my house or a block and a half, and I would never get a notice about what's going on. And that just, I just can't see that is sufficient for providing neighborhood notice or notice about something that's a development that's gonna happen.
Yeah, I should have mentioned, there's also a requirement to post the property with the land use signs that you see. So the land use signs have to be up for the entire public comment period or up until the end of a closure of a public hearing process.
So that's great for those of us like myself who walk our dogs in the neighborhood, but,
Right, yeah.
you know, this is a topic we should revisit.
I would agree with that, and I've seen those very signs in Park Place that have been pretty much destroyed or upside down or not there. You know, I don't know if there's a sign patrol or what, but I would agree with Commissioner Lyle Smith.
I just wanted to add that I think the posting is appropriate and adds to information that the public's going to get. However, I think that as the staff drives through, they should probably go back and check. We have one across the street that's posted in front of a frosted piece of glass, so it's not readable. And I've gotten a couple of calls about it already.
If you ever see that, let us know. We have an affidavit the applicant signed they're responsible for keeping it up every day that we identify that it needs to be up. And there's rules of where you can put it, how close to the street and that sort of thing.
Like I said, across the street, it's posted in front of a piece of frosted glass, so it's completely unreadable.
We'll take a look.
Okay.
Continuing with administration and procedures, we've modified some applications, we're proposing modifications to the items that we listed to allow earlier review of potential issues related to property title issues. And one item that staff would like to add into this section is a clarification for how long a land use approval is valid and when expirations occur. Is it appropriate to talk about this now, or? Okay. So the new code language extends the approval period for a type 1 through 4 decision from 2 years to 3 years for the land use approval, and then clarifies that the land use approval expires if a building permit has not been issued for within 5 years, or in the case of a land division, if a final plat has not been recorded within 5 years of a final decision, which significantly extends the validity of a land use decision. Currently, it is basically 2 years plus a 1-year extension, and then you have to be in the building permit process completely by that time, or your land use approval expires, so.
Yeah, one problem that we've run into recently is on the commercial side of the house. So it's clear and you have to be platted within a certain time frame for land divisions. But our code says that as long as you pull a building permit within a certain time frame, you're sort of good forever and there's no backstop. And so we wanted to make clear that we have clear guidance of what the rules are for when things expire, and that at least on the commercial side of the house, there's a backstop. You can't have an approval from 40 years ago and then go get a building permit now.
Okay, well, I don't disagree with the intent, but I think changing the approval of a land use application from 2 years to 3 years, when it's already 3 years now, they can get an extension. I don't think they should go on forever. If they can't get it done and they don't have any substantial reasons as to why they can't get it done, they can always get an extension. But I think expanding it to 3 years and then adding another year for extension, I don't think that that's reasonable, and I don't think it's prudent for the city to have all these applications that are hanging out there. And I don't understand why 3 years total is not substantially enough.
Is the city tasked with giving notification that these are about to expire, or does that fall upon the applicant to track his own?
Good question. It is incumbent on the applicant to keep up with that.
Thank you.
So do we want to pull that one aside?
I would think so.
That issue too?
Well,
Okay.
there's a number. Do we need to define these as we go along? Because I mean, there's previous ones that I want to pull aside.
We're going to summarize them at the end because I want to make
Okay.
sure that we hear everything that you're telling us.
Thanks.
So, coming out of the procedures review, the top planning commission discussion items were lot size reduction or averaging, and a provision in the application requirements that requires that a surveyor prepare a preliminary site plan for a land division application. And the proposal to prohibit any CCNR or covenant control and controls and restrictions that place limitations on accessory dwelling units or accessory dwelling units. That would be reviewing new draft CCNRs to assure that they don't include those provisions. It would not be retroactive or affect existing CCNRs.
Yeah, I recall looking at the new version. It says that the CCNRs shall not prohibit ADUs.
Correct.
And I think that should be the subject of discussion.
Yeah.
Obviously, lot size averaging is dear to me.
So we're going to talk about these three next, starting with lot size reduction. So in 2018, concerns that the existing allowance for lot averaging allowed for too many lots to be below the zoning minimum and that the lot sizes could be too small prompted revisions to the code. Prior to those revisions, the code simply allowed for 20% lot averaging of all lots, provided that the average of the lots throughout the subdivision met the minimum lot size. And then we heard testimony throughout the city commission process that the original provisions should be returned to allow some development flexibility in response to some of the challenges presented by topography or parcel shape, meeting city street standards and other property constraints. So welcome a discussion about that.
Well, that's going to be a long discussion.
Yes, and of course, I've been through this many, many times,
Yes,
so
you have.
I get the other things that you're talking about, but how would the city standards be a constraint? I mean, if somebody is going to develop a piece of property, they know what the requirements are. I can understand some exceptions for topography, which a person doesn't have any control over, or things that affect the land, but I think things that relate specifically to the city's standards, I'm not sure I feel comfortable with allowing somebody to vary those unless they have a really darn good reason. And there are procedures in our code which allow for those exceptions. I support the exceptions. I don't support making the exception the rule. And I think you heard me many times at Planning Commission about how concerned we were and what we were seeing over time, which was happening with the lot averaging, and that was not my understanding nor my comprehension of what the purpose of the lot averaging. It's kind of morphed into something else. And I think that the compromise that's being proposed is reasonable, and I support development. And I think that, as I said, there are exceptions. And I think the city staff has done an excellent job in dealing with those types of exceptions without making those the general rule for everything.
Right, so you've heard some testimony talking about what those specific concerns are with respect to the
Yes.
street standards, so I'm not going to belabor that.
No.
From staff's perspective, you know, we always felt that they did provide some flexibility, which is important when you're trying to make efficient use of land. Also, in line with the equitable housing goals, the intent was to not only reduce barriers to more equitable housing, but also to try to provide more diversity in subdivisions, possibly through changing lot sizes, which would in turn affect house sizes and potentially prices as well. So it could result in greater interest and variety in residential lots and that sort of thing. So, but what we also heard was that if this is taken too far, it results in an unanticipated reduction of lot size adjacent to a neighborhood where they didn't expect it, because they were expecting a particular lot size and that sort of thing. There may be the impression of that because a development occurs right next to a parcel which is currently undivided and is on a large parcel. So I don't know specific situations where that comes up, but it is the impression that we heard comments about.
Well, that's valid. In speaking to Damon Mabey, who was there when this was originally adopted, it was to accommodate those sections of land that would not allow you to do the lot. If you said it was going to be R10 and you couldn't get a certain number of R10s, then we allowed some downsizing. But it was bastardized, and we saw how it was bastardized. And, you know, I don't want a community thinking they're getting an R10, agreeing to get an R8, and then with lot averaging, getting to some high number of homes that are now R6. So if you want to build an R6, come forward and tell me I want to build an R6. So this, we don't need to discuss it in length, other than we know we're going to discuss it on April 3rd. Okay.
The surveyor requirement is a fairly straightforward issue, in my opinion. We heard testimony that there are a variety of professionals involved in the preparation of plans for subdivisions, and those include engineers, surveyors, architects, and land use planners. In that testimony, it was suggested that the language be amended so that we wouldn't require that the site plan be prepared by a surveyor, but rather that an existing conditions plan instead be prepared by a surveyor, and that is in keeping with industry practice. And then all of the necessary components of a preliminary site plan flow from that, but which could be prepared by other professionals. State law still requires that a final plat be prepared by a licensed public surveyor.
Prepared or signed off on.
Well, stamped and signed
Yes.
off, right, yeah. So as far as staff concerns, it's a reasonable suggestion and a change.
Pete, were there other professionals that were suggesting that change? Because I only recall hearing from one person.
Well, there is more than one. I believe
we got letters about that from that one particular
at least
person.
one more. But yeah, it's not more than two, I think. Yeah.
Not more than two, he said.
Okay.
Okay.
So with respect to covenants and controls and restrictions, I just mentioned this. So the proposed language is that proposed new CCNRs shall not prohibit or impose additional restrictions on accessory dwelling units and/or internal conversions to the extent permitted in the municipal code in place at the time of final plat submittal.
So are the CCNRs reviewed by city prior to owners signing off on
We
them?
require those as an application requirement prior to final plat.
And if the city should miss something that would be in contravention of this, would this still be the overriding law, Mr. Gevisman?
Interesting question. Sorry, Mayor.
Because I know the city never misses anything.
People are human.
I know,
People
that's
are
what I
reviewing
mean.
it. And I don't know the answer to that question.
Can you have an answer when you come back on the 6th?
Sure.
Okay, thank you, sir.
And just to clarify, the only reason why we review CCNRs now is to make sure that they don't conflict with the city code. For example, if they say you have to have a 6-foot tall fence in your front yard and we only allow 3.5 feet tall fences in the front yard, that's really all we're looking for, so.
So is there no way to go back and make this apply to existing CCNRs?
Probably be a contract clause provision. CCNRs are a contract between the various homeowners, and we'd be going back and abrogating that contract.
What if it gets preempted by state law?
I don't think even state law can't violate the contract clause.
You'll see me in court if they do it.
Okay.
Yeah, we can't go back and make something retroactive
Okay.
like that.
Okay, is there anything else, Pete?
Can we?
Oh, that is mostly it.
So can we return to the surveyor preparation of a land division? So I'm looking at the larger topics of debate document, and it seems like what's proposed and what the staff recommends are two different things. Is that true?
Do you recommend, what is proposed from the planning commission
is what came out of the planning commission. It was after the planning commission and staff recommendation came out that we heard comment from the public that provided an alternative. So yeah, they probably are all different. We recommend, if you want to say that the existing conditions is required by a surveyor, then that's good enough, since everything else will be drawn based off the existing conditions. But our original proposal was to say that the plat is by a surveyor, since it ultimately has to be signed off by a surveyor. So there probably is a little difference there. I'll have to check that document to make sure the clarity.
Okay.
There is a difference, I've read it.
Okay,
You're
it's
right.
not just me, I'm
No,
reading
it's
it,
not
and
just
so
you.
it's hard for me to tell
It came
which
up
direction
after
you're going
planning
with, if you're
commission.
going with the proposed or with the staff recommendation.
We think the proposed is fine.
Because I like the staff recommendation, so that's why I'm trying to figure out which direction you're headed, but.
In this situation, we agree with the testimony that's been given during city commission, rather than the original language that's in your packet, and we would support the change that's been suggested.
And the things that we think about in that, and maybe we can add more context to that
Yeah.
before April 3rd, when we're going to give you that for all of these issues,
Yes.
is what is the risk? So if someone draws out a subdivision plan and then we do preliminary approval, you know, they give us all these dimensions and they all meet our standards, and then they go to plat the thing and they realize, oh no, we were way off. You can actually, the lots are actually a lot different than that. We're trying to minimize that risk. So that's why originally we thought, hey, a survey signs off on it in the end, let's just have them draw it in the beginning. Not realizing that surveyors don't always draw them. They sign off on other people's, but they do the existing conditions. And that's generally a standard for a lot of the development that we see. We do have some people that just want to subdivide their own property and they don't always get surveyors on board immediately, and that's where we'll see the most discretion. So that was generally the problem we were trying to solve.
But an existing conditions site plan is going to look at the outside boundaries of that parcel of land and have those monuments on there so that you know that you're starting with the right amount of land. And then what happens internal to that piece of ground in terms of the new lot lines and the parcel sizes, you know, I think is still, it's going to be prepared by the other professionals, and I think is a reasonable way to review a land division.
Okay, so I read that as your recommendation is what this document says is the staff recommendation. And not what's proposed.
Yes, that's correct. In the summary of larger topics of debate.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
Move on.
Can you go to the next list?
All right, so our current list includes 18 items, to which we will be adding a discussion about the clarification about the covenants, controls, and restrictions clauses, the distance of notice area, assuring that language of the notice has a plain language description of what is proposed, and we'll also be clarifying the discussion about extensions of land use approvals and the validity of that.
What else?
Anything else?
You hit the highlights.
I just have a question about your schedule.
Well, I'll tell you right now, we're not gonna get through it all on April 3rd.
Right. Well, right. I kind of agree with that too, but, so in the published schedule that's out right now, that was last updated
We'll update that.
February 8th. You addressed the hearing date of April 3rd, but, the last sentence there says that revisions to the code based on city commission direction will be compiled and released for review no later than March 27th. I don't see how that can be a correct statement. So, because I don't feel like the city commission's given you direction in order for you to create a new revised version. So, is it that those dates that you're planning to release a new revised version of the code for us to kind of look through before we go to, after the April 3rd meeting? Is that correct?
Yes, our apologies. It sounds like there was a typo when we updated the schedule. We probably forgot to update that one. The goal is to get direction on the outstanding issues on April 3rd. And after April 3rd, we will make the code amendments that need to implement the direction that you provided. And we would come back with the final document a week later on April 10th, which is a week before the April 17th hearing. So you would see the final thing 2 weeks after you give us the final direction.
Well, let me tell you right now, I think you need to extend your timeline. Because we're not gonna make it through all of these 18 items on April 3rd, which means probably close to half of them are gonna have to be done on the 17th, which pushes back, you know, the timeline for into the first or second meeting in May. So, you know, I would rather us release a timeline that's realistic rather than one that is obviously, you know, I see 6 or 8 hours of discussion here at a minimum.
We weren't sure how many issues would be on April 3rd when we started.
I understand.
But, okay, so
I'm not beating anybody up, I'm
Yeah.
just saying, let's push the timeline out.
we can come up with a new schedule
split 'em
and
up.
we'll split the list into 2 different hearing dates. You think that's okay? And then,
What I would like to do is I would like staff to not look at these in numerical order. I would like you to look at them in the most or least controversial. So if it's something like the CCNR for, you know, the ADU conversion, I think that's a 5-minute discussion if that. So pick out the, you know, pick the low hanging fruit, let's do that on the second meeting. And let's have the meaty discussion on the April 3rd.
Okay.
Is everybody okay with that?
I'm not.
Guess it depends who thinks it's critical element.
What's controversial to you?
Right.
Well, I apologize for that, but.
No, you
just
can't
get-
apologize for it. This was planned 6 months ago.
Right.
When I had no intention of doing what I'm doing right now.
All right.
But you know how things happen. Things happen for a reason. So if you're
Okay.
gonna do the meaty stuff on the 3rd, then I will need to meet with staff before I leave. But if you reverse it, you can deal with the non-meaty stuff on the 3rd.
We don't implement anything until it's all done, so what's the difference? What order we do them in?
would you like to tell us what item you want discussed which date, or how do you want us to proceed?
You said low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, I did, but I'm not gonna go through it right now. Why don't I sit down with you and Tony and we can kind of work that out. We'll send out an email to the commission and see if there's any objections.
Okay.
Is that okay? All right,
Is that all right?
Doesn't matter to me. We gotta get through them, so.
yeah.
All right.
Okay, is there a motion?
Was there more to add to the list from anybody?
I don't have anything.
As I said, I hated to exclude something that we missed by oversight, especially with the addition of a new commissioner, so maybe, I think the list is complete. If there is something, I don't want to exclude it.
You can pull anything.
Yeah.
Or add.
The record's
Or add,
still
yeah, that's okay.
open.
Yeah.
People can
Well,
comment
and
on
there's
anything.
also, we have the ability anytime to look at a piece of code and say, we don't like this, we want to change it.
And then we created a menu to help you sort of write down your notes and move through each of these issues that we'll be posting with the agenda as well.
Okay?
Final
Why don't we meet
thing-
why don't we meet on Friday? Pick a time, let me know.
Final thing I wanted to say is we have 2 items, testimony that are on your computers. One from the Home Builders Association discussing the lot size averaging, and the other from Icon Construction which talks about the Park Place and South End design standards.
Has everybody had a chance to read the letter from Icon?
That was published the night we originally discussed it, correct?
No, they sent a new one.
This is a brand new one, and I would
not see it.
encourage
Where is
you to take a look at that and really read it, because they've done a very good job of looking at the actual concept plans versus what the code and showing some, you know, real dichotomies between the two.
Yeah, I perused it. I was actually interested to hear what the city staff's response was to that. I mean, they're essentially saying, we didn't adopt code that matches the concept plan work that was done. And so, yeah, I've perused it. I haven't gone through line by line to do my own comparison, but
Oh, so I have
we're looking forward to talking about it.
I have to back up here a second because this is a public hearing. That was the end of the staff report, is that correct?
Correct.
And then actually one last thing is, if I could take a copy of the testimony from My Father's Heart, some of it talked, a little bit alluded to the code amendment, so I might just copy that, put in the record as well.
Okay, so I'm gonna open the public hearing. And we have Mr. Gifford and Mr. Gusdorf.
Mr. Mayor and City Commissioners, my name is still William Gifford, and I still live in Oregon City. I'll be pretty brief on this.
Sorry, go ahead.
Do I snicker when you talk? Well, yeah, okay.
I just wanted to make sure that was actually Mr. Gifford.
I was taking a look at this technical memorandum from the Equitable Housing Project Advisory Team and the technical advisory team members, and I thought it was a good document, and what their policy recommendations are specifically in the area of equitable housing. And there's nothing the city can do to control material costs. The costs are going up. Or labor costs. Labor costs are going up. Property values go up. I think this is a pretty high view, but to me, the only way that the city can really accomplish any meaningful efforts of establishing equitable housing is to reduce restrictions to providing such housing. I mean, there's not too much else you can do. Again, you can't control materials, you can't control labor, or property costs. So the only thing you really can do is to streamline procedures, to streamline permitting processes, and to allow design standards that provide for attainable, equitable housing if we want our citizens. And one of the comments that I heard was to realize that the concept plan areas, particularly of Park Place and South End, seem to be being steered by the residents of those areas, and yet it's the people that want to move into those areas that are not in those concept plan areas right now that are going to be most affected by costs. And I'm not talking about those people who already have their homes, but I'm talking about their children. We want to be able to have some place for our kids to live if we want them to live in this city as well. So I'm just asking you to take special interest at what you can do to reduce costs.
Thanks, sir. Darren?
My name is Darren Gusdorf. I'm the general manager of Icon Construction and Development. We're located at 1980 Willamette Falls Drive in West Lynn. Good evening, Mayor Holliday and City Commissioners. Just a few months back, revisions to the lot averaging code were adopted in response to a prior development project that included a large power line tract in their lot averaging calculations. Soon after, staff, Planning Commission, and the City Commission worked together to change this chapter of code, which now disallows power line tracts from being counted in lot averaging. We applaud this code change and feel it accurately negates this from happening again. Now, only a few months later, additional revisions to this chapter are being brought before you again. If approved, this will restrict the current allowable lot reduction from 20% to 10% and restrict 75% of the development site from using any form of lot averaging at all. As development and planning design standards continue to evolve in Oregon City, such as block lengths, street alignments, ped bike connections, on-site storm detention, house and driveway configurations, etc., development constraints make the lot yield in the underlying zone impossible to meet without lot averaging. In 2002, Oregon City staff recognized the challenges affiliated with these development constraints, and with the help of Planning and City Commission back then, they adopted lot averaging, 1, to allow the needed flexibility for good land use planning, and 2, to avoid repeated variance requests that were coming in with nearly every development application prior. In these proposed coast changes, if these proposed coast changes are approved, lot yields will diminish in nearly every development project. This will result in higher finished lot costs, resulting in higher home prices. In addition, the city would lose approximately $30,000 in SDC revenue for every unit lost. In order to keep home prices down, we need to start with development flexibility and maximize lot yields while still staying within the boundaries of the underlying zone. Using a 10-lot development for an example, if 3 lots were lost as a result of this code revision, which is likely possible, the city would lose around $90,000 in SDC revenue, and home prices per unit will increase approximately $65,000 each. This will impact projects big or small. Even the 2 or 3 lot minor partitions will be impacted, as stated previously by a property owner that testified that he would not be able to get his minor partition to work without the utilization of lot averaging as it is written today. We recognize the importance and need for equitable housing. We need this to work. If these code revisions are approved as written, the equitable housing program will be doomed before it even has a chance to succeed. This will diminish lot yields. It will drive up home prices and squash any hopes of establishing equitable housing opportunities in nearly every future development that comes through this city. We encourage the City Commission to think hard on the impacts of this current code change and discuss with city staff the adverse impacts that this will have prior to the next deliberation hearing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Guile.
A cheerful good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm glad Denise is sitting there and not me. I wasn't planning on saying anything tonight, so it's just off the cuff, some observations we've been making about some of the presentation by the staff. Since lot averaging just came up, I should address that. We originally had something before us on the Planning Commission where this place was packed with neighbors. They had size 8 and 10 lots, and when they heard about the lot averaging, they were asking for a lot averaging of R8, but the majority, almost 80%, I believe it was, came in at R6s. So in other words, lot averaging in those cases didn't work. We understood the power line, all that, but those neighbors to go down to R6 behind our 10s was kind of unfair to them for what they thought was existing. It was sent back to the Planning Commission at the time. You had a work session. You told us the Planning Commission to work on it again. I remember that Michael Robertson came in and said the Planning Commission had erred in our decision on that when we turned it down, and it was overturned by the current City Commission at the time. But again, all we were trying to do, we were listening to the citizens, and we realized it just didn't seem to make sense to them. Another item, I'm hoping and I'm glad that you will take another look at it, because we voted 4-2 each time on our Planning Commission to approve the lot averaging as it was that we proposed, different than what the City Commission had come up with. Another thing we came up with under, I think it was under the administration policies, was removing the requirement to submit sign-in sheets for the neighborhood association meetings. There was a few years back when in Park Place, half the people that came in were not even from the city. They've been requested to come in and vote. We didn't know where they were from. Jackie Hammond Williams sat there and asked for people to sign in. Half of them didn't want to sign in because they didn't want to tell us where they were from. Now, I'm not sure if they meant to submit it into the record, but if you're submitted into the record, if someone wanted to check to see who was actually at that meeting, and if they were city residents, I think that's critical to make sure that that is submitted to the city. Several people here from neighborhood associations, and I think we all agree that should be a matter of the record. And the final thing, I've got 53 seconds, is CC&Rs. You know, when I moved here, I hated living in a homeowners association because I hated the CC&Rs. But I'm glad that our CCNRs are in place, that they cannot change and add things in our neighborhood. Already with our size of our homes, it just wouldn't work. I'm sorry to see that there's going to be a restriction on CCNRs in the future, saying that they can do these certain things with the homeowners association. A lot of people don't read their homeowner association rules when they sign on the dotted line to buy a home. I never read them all, or probably wouldn't have signed. And that's going to happen a lot. People need to know that those lots can change and things can happen. I hate to see it happen in the future, but definitely, Rachel, never retroactive to what we have. I think half the neighborhood would move out. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Is there any further public testimony? I'm going to close the public hearing. Is there a motion for continuance?
I would so move.
Seconded.
Moved by Commissioner McGriff, seconded by.
Time and date certain?
Is it April 3rd? Yes, to April 3rd.
Seconded by Commissioner O'Donnell. Is there any further discussion? Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith.
Aye.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
All right. Moving on, general business, 19-187, second reading of ordinance number 19-1002, false alarm reduction and permit program. Chief Band, oh, I guess Chief Band isn't here. Chief Clerk.
Mayor and Commission, this is the second reading for the ordinance of the false alarm reduction and permit program. I can answer questions if you may have any.
I don't think so.
No, I actually have just a brief question. So I read it and I wanted to know, have we had seen an increase in the number of false alarm?
It hasn't been enacted yet.
No, I mean, right now, I know that if your alarm goes off and you have to come back a couple more times, the police department isn't very happy about that, and there's some small penalty. So I'm just curious as whether over the time from the current ordinance to what you're recommending have you seen any changes in that? Are there less?
We hope to see a
drastically
decrease.
reduced.
We currently have about 900 alarms annually. And in 2018, 18 of those alarms were actual a burglary or some kind of a real alarm. That's a combination of residents and business.
2%.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's
typically 50% of false alarms are caused by the user.
Yeah, user or the person watering the plants or animals or.
Right.
Yeah.
Wind.
So we hope that this reduces
all kinds of things.
our manpower drastically.
Okay, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve 19-187, second reading of ordinance number 19-1002, false alarm reduction and permit program.
Second. Moved by Commissioner Lyle Smith, seconded by Commissioner Smith. Mr. Weisman.
Ordinance number 19-1002, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City repealing and replacing Title V Business Licenses and Regulations, Chapter 5.08, Alarm Systems of the Oregon City Municipal Code 2001.
Call a roll, please.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith.
Aye.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye. Does anybody want to pull anything from the consent agenda?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Which one?
The first one, adjusting the alarm system user permit fees. Mainly just because I have a couple questions.
Okay. Okay, Captain Clary, you're in the hot seat.
Oh, here we go. Yes, ma'am.
So I was looking at your exhibit and the regional comparison. And I was wondering, in comparing Oregon City's new proposed fee schedule to others like Canby, and I don't know what other cities were in there. I'm wondering about the seniors and low income fee of $12 and government at $0. I mean, if I have my choice, I would charge government entities and not low income and seniors or folks with disabilities. So that seems to be opposite of what I would prefer. So I'm just wondering how we got there. I know Canby, I believe, is $0 for seniors or low income, and I'm also not sure how we're defining low income or disabled. I didn't see that defined anywhere in either the second reading ordinance that we just approved or in this language. So those were my questions.
Yeah, I can't describe how we define low income, but I can tell you that Canby actually has a $10 fee for the senior rate,
Right.
and ours is at 12.
So theirs is 10, ours is
Yeah.
12. I mean, like, how do we derive that we thought 12 was appropriate?
I think we basically cut it in half from the initial fee, is what we did.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The initial fee is 25, and we cut it in half for those two.
And just to follow up on Commissioner Smith's request, why does government get a pass?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't answer that.
Are you
I
recommending
can
they
answer
put a
that.
fee
Being the
in
county
for
seat,
that?
we certainly have a lot of them, and there's,
I mean, if we're looking inside Oregon City's jurisdiction, there's us and Clackamas County and maybe a couple other smaller jurisdictions. How often do we get false alarms from those?
I can tell you the courthouse goes off frequently, but we do not respond. The sheriff's office responds to the courthouse. Their civil
Okay.
division does, or their patrol will.
And do those guys also respond to alarms at the county's campus instead of Oregon City?
I don't know of a problem up there,
So,
honestly.
I mean, the health division's up there, the surveyor's
Yeah.
up there, the extension
Yeah.
service is up there.
In my tenure, the only problem we've had was the courthouse, and we fixed that by saying we're not responding anymore. You guys can respond to it because it's.
And we have that in writing somewhere?
I don't know if it's in writing.
Well,
But I can tell you
yeah,
that.
let's get it in writing, so that, at some point in time, we're not somehow liable because we didn't respond and we had a
Yeah.
handshake agreement that, the county was gonna do that. Beyond that, I don't see any reason to exempt government organizations from our fee. The reason we have these fees is to have people, to encourage people on an escalating basis to fix their alarms so they aren't causing false alarms in the first place. And government, a lot of times, is the last person to maintain something, so.
When they're the last ones, I would let off the hook.
Agree.
I mean,
What's good for one is good for the other.
Well, but if we're not responding to certain alarms, then why are we, well, I guess we do want to know where they are. I guess that's the issue.
Yeah.
That way, forewarned is forewarned.
I mean, I was in the business for 25 years, so it's clear, I understand, there's certain people that have their alarms that don't fix problems that are a problem, a loose front door that rattles enough that sets off, that trips the alarm or whatever, they won't fix it. The alarm company gets hassled, and at some point, even the alarm company has to say, well, we've done everything we can, but the customer won't pay for the repair. And so this is the last step to say, okay, if you're gonna have an alarm and you won't fix it, then we're just not gonna respond anymore.
What would you recommend for a fee then, Rachel?
Well,
Would
I-
you suggest $25 since
Yeah.
business and government,
Sure.
residents are paying $25?
Sure.
Why don't we do this? Let's, there's no huge rush on this, right?
No, the new code goes into effect mid-April, so
So why don't you, let's just pull this off. Captain Fleury, you can take this back to Chief Band and you guys can take what you heard tonight and revamp it and then bring it back to us.
Yeah, I have a hard time changing the senior residential 65 and older from 0 to 12. I mean, I don't know, these are the populations that are struggling the most, the low income and the senior residential. And senior and residential went from 0 to 12, and I realized we reduced the low income from 20 to 12.
But I think
I don't know,
also, I think also in the same discussion that you have with Chief Band, that, we need to define what low income is.
Yeah, I looked for it, I couldn't
I
find
think we
anything.
have it, we have a low-income program. I mean, we can look into this since we're delaying it as it relates to utility bills. We can see if we use that same standard that we use in finance.
Okay.
As it relates to our low-income
And
program.
somehow tie
I mean,
those
it
two
should be
together.
clear. Yeah, it should be clear. I'm not sure if someone were to come in and submit an application, who's checking that box? How do we know that they're low income,
Okay.
So,
We'll pull this off the agenda tonight. Captain Fleury, you have your orders.
Got it.
For clarification, for government, does that include community college, public schools?
Yes.
So make it clear, all government entities.
They're the government.
Do we see a high issue with alarms at those facilities?
The only facility that I'm aware of having the high alarm is the courthouse. They use the law library all the time, and it goes off frequently.
see no problem with incentivizing everybody to get it right. The danger to an officer responding to an alarm, regardless of the source, is the same. So they all need to toe the line and get their house in order with the same penalties.
Okay, we're gonna move on. Anything else off the consent agenda? Then is there a motion?
I would move that we postpone this, let's see, get the ordinance right here.
Actually, I've already pulled that one.
Oh,
We're
you
just-
pulled it?
Yeah.
Okay.
we're
Then the
just-
rest of the consent agenda?
Yes.
Okay, I move approval of the remainder of the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner McGriff, seconded by Commissioner Smith. Further discussion? Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith.
Aye.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye. Mr. Manager.
I have an update tonight from Ms. Turway.
Thank you. I wanted to invite you to an open house for our Historic Review Board policies. This is very
I
small.
can read that really easy. Sure.
It's open house April 2nd. It's here at City Hall from 4 to 6 p.m. before our Historic Review Board meeting. And we'll be talking about some Historic Review Board policies that they're looking at, adding clarity to and modernizing some of our policies, as well as adding one new policy for solar panels.
Okay, anything else?
Tomorrow, March 21st at 7 p.m., the Police Department facility design presentation will be made to the Rivercrest Neighborhood Association. So once again, their meeting is at 7 p.m. at 1321 Lynn Avenue, the Evangelical Presbyterian Church. And then last, I will be out of the office next week. John Lewis will be acting while I'm away. That's all I have for tonight.
Okay. Commissioner Smith, you got anything for us?
Just want to welcome Commissioner McGriff and look forward to working with you. And glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
I'd echo the same sentiments, and we've all been attending different meetings, whether it be Willamette Falls Legacy, Newell Creek, First Street, everything. So most of us have been seen at those, and I'll leave it at that.
Commissioner Lyle Smith?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I have a couple of items. First of all, one of the things I'd like to bring up is our work session start times. It's something I think that our commission can consider as a group. It's currently 5:30. I would like to request us, we consider moving it to 6 p.m. if nobody has any objections
I do
to
not.
that.
I support your request.
May I chime in on that?
Sure.
You know, we've got new commissioners, and even I have not ever reviewed the rules of conducting a work session. Could we take a look at those and see if there's any other changes we may want to make at that time, since we're already going to change the time?
I would echo that.
Okay.
If I could just,
Yes.
so building on that, what we were proposing with staff was to
They just asked if we could bring it to
Oh, sorry.
work session,
Let's
and
have
we'll
a
be bringing it, we actually will be bringing it to a work session our April work session will be,
Okay.
that will be one of the items.
Thank you.
Okay. And related to that is just a comment about the time in which the city is hosting open houses, public meetings, and stuff like the State of the City address that was held last week in the middle of the day, and also charged a fee in order for folks to get in here that address. I and the Historic Review Board from 4 to 6 open house. And I know there's been a couple of other opportunities at neighborhood associations. I'm just using these as examples. I don't think we are showing good transparency and options for the public if we don't hold our open houses and our public meetings at a time when people who are working can make it. I know for one, I did not attend the State of the City address last week because I was working. I'm kind of appalled that was the time that was picked for the State of the City.
Hang on, let me address that, all right? I've been working to do exactly what you said for 4 years, but the State of the City traditionally has been hosted by the Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber of Commerce has been reluctant to go to the evening because their members, which is where that's done at, are working people, and it takes the lunch hour, and so that's what happened. Now, it's already been done now that we're going to move the State of the City to evening starting next year. So beyond that,
That's great. That's great news. And so I would just encourage the city staff to, I know we tax our staff by asking them to stay late. John and I were at a meeting at 7:30 this morning at Clackamas County, and we're here still at almost 9 o'clock tonight. So we've put in long days, and I realize what I'm asking for, but you know, if we want to reach a larger segment of our population and get our residents to participate, they have to be, you know, hopefully most of them work, you know, and are contributing. And you know, as far as I know, most of us need to work to pay our bills. And so it's just something for us to consider that's near and dear to my heart. And so I just wanted to make that statement. The only other thing I would mention is I attended the Metro Policy Advisory Committee meeting last week, and I've asked Katie to provide the executive summary of the report that was presented to MPAC. That is the acronym for that group. It's called the Tri-County Equitable Housing Strategy to Expand Supportive Housing for People Experiencing Chronic Homelessness. I do have the full report and can provide that for folks who are interested. This is a report that was recently released last month, and so this was brand new. This was a multi-county, 3-county study, which included Clackamas County, Multnomah, and Washington. And it is really focused on removing silos and trying to address chronic homelessness as a system and as a region. And so there's some really key facts in this executive summary that I think are worth pointing out. One in particular, that it's nearly twice as expensive for people to remain homeless as it is for them to be successfully housed. And the cost of someone who's chronically homeless is costing public systems about $40,000 a year, while if we were to provide supportive housing in the metro area, that cost goes down to $22,500. And this study is really focused on, we talk about affordable housing in the missing middle, but this one is really focused on deeply affordable housing. So we're talking about the lowest incomes of 0 to 30% of median income. There's no way these folks could afford housing in our market today. And so this regional, I won't say regional, but it is a regional, it's a tri-county effort to remove silos, provide more than just housing, but also services that are required. And this study showed that Clackamas County needed approximately 440 deeply affordable housing units. So anyway, I'll stop there, but I just wanted the commission to have the executive summary. And if you're interested in the full report, I'm happy to share that with you. But I guess the end point is that this problem is going to require all of us to contribute. And Oregon City has a role in that. I'm not sure where it's going to go and where we can contribute and with the housing bond that's coming out of Metro, but we'll see what the future provides.
So just to follow up on Commissioner Lass Smith there for a second, there's an interesting report that was done by Como News in Seattle. I would encourage everyone to, if you Google Como and Seattle is Dying is the title of the piece, to go look at that. It's about an hour long, but it's well worth the watch. At the last 15 minutes, they offer some solutions that are being done, I believe in Rhode Island or some other place in the East Coast. But the basic premise, and it seems to be supported by the facts, is that the great majority of those in that 0 to 30% are actually due to either alcohol, drug addiction, or some other, chronic
Mental
issues.
illness.
And how this organization back east is working to deal with both the criminal element of that and then the supportive element of that. So with that, Commissioner McGriff, you have anything for us?
I do. I just wanted to add to my fellow commissioners that I thank you, and I'm looking forward to working with everyone And I'm looking forward to continuing my work with all the staff that I've worked with over the last 20-plus years. I do want to say that I was among the privileged thousands last night to attend the discussion with former First Lady Michelle Obama, and it was absolutely fantastic. I will tell you, she's an incredible woman. Couple of things that she said resonated with me. I know many of you know that I am a very strong citizen advocate, and I come to the City of Oregon City from a grassroots background, starting at the lowest levels of your local government and working my way up. And it's not, my intent was not to actually be here at some point in time, but I'm here now. A couple of things she said that were very interesting about her time in the 8 years in the White House. And she talked about the role of government and what the role of government plays in the lives of our community. And her two-line statement was, cities, counties, or whatever jurisdiction it is, work on behalf of the community, not the reverse. And it was up there on the screen in front of, like I said, the multitudes last night. And I thought about that all the way home on Max. And I really realized that Oregon City generally does a pretty good job, but we can always do better. And I know that we have a very dedicated staff that's interested in promoting involvement. Sometimes the process takes longer, but I think we have many examples of the process taking a little longer that resulted in fantastic results. And I've testified to those two projects many times. I agree with you in the sense that for years I have been diligently trying to get the time for the Historic Review Board changed from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock so that regular people who might want to eat something before they come to a meeting are not at a meeting when they're grumpy and hungry and tired and they really want to go home and they're looking at their watches, because I think our committees and commissions are important. And if there was any way that I could provide some sort of an incentive to get people out of their houses to come down here and meet with us and talk with us, I would certainly love to do it, but I haven't figured out what that magic bullet is yet. But maybe it's out there. But I just, want you to know that that was something that resonated with me, and it was pretty fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Long, you said you forgot something?
Yeah, I had a housekeeping matter I'd like to, I don't know quite how to address it. The school district has decided not to pursue the urban growth boundary change, and we had issued a letter of support. I'd like to see what it takes to just withdraw that rather than leave it outstanding. And if in the future the school district decides to pursue that again under other circumstances, we could reconsider it and they could resubmit a letter. So it's just a formality.
I would totally concur with that.
Yes, I agree with that.
Me too.
Fine.
That's all I had.
Okay, so I'll, as usual, go last. First of all, I want to apologize to Commissioner McGriff for not being here at your swearing in. I know that there is some rumor out there that it was something personal between me and you. I assure you that it wasn't. The city of Canby is talking about, actually they're holding a resolution meeting tonight to start enforcing parking in downtown Canby. And as my partner Betty has a business in downtown Canby in that zone, I felt it was important for her business that I show up and testify. Mayor Hodgson was kind enough to allow me to be the first person to speak right after they were done with their opening ceremonies, so I could get here as soon as I can. So once again, I want to welcome you to the City Commission, and I want to apologize for not being here, but family has to come first sometimes, and I think I have probably the best attendance record of anyone on the City Commission, at least in the 4 years I've been here. So with that, welcome to the City Commission.
Thank you.
And is there anything else? Anything good of your? Then we're adjourned.